Nancy Drew and the Clue Crew, 18. Earth Day Escapade. Chapter 1. Queen or Mean. Detectives like me do lots of things to help the earth. 8-year-old Nancy Drew read out loud. My detective club, the Clue Crew, recycles our clue bags, except the one with icky stuff inside, like chewed up gum or scrappy band-aids. Ew, gross, Deidre Shannon cried from her desk. Nancy ignored Deidre as she kept reading her essay. What I do to help save the earth. Every kid in Mrs. Ramirez's third grade class had written an essay for her Earth Week. Earth Week was coming up. The River Heights Elementary School was planning a parade down River Street. Because Mrs. Ramirez's class had collected the most cans and bottles to recycle, they would have their own parade float. Best of all, the student who wrote the best essay would be picked of Mrs. Ramirez to be the Queen of Green. And that's how Bess, George, and I helped save the earth. Nancy finished reading. She brushed aside her reddish blonde bangs, looked off, and smiled. Thank you, Nancy, Mrs. Ramirez said. Bess Marvin and George Fane both gave Nancy a thumbs up as she walked back to her desk. Awesome, Nancy, whispered George. Even the icky part, Bess giggled. Thanks, Nancy whispered back. She was the last in the class to read her essay. As she sat down, she felt Felicity Faulkner tap her shoulder. Felicity sat in the desk behind Nancy. She was also the new kid in the class. I like the part about the energy-saving light bulbs in the crew's flashlights, Felicity whispered, leaning over. We use only CFL bulbs at home. Nancy already know. Felicity's whole essay had been about how earth-friendly her family was. Not only did the Faulkners save electricity, they saved water by flushing the toilet only when absolutely necessary. Deidre was grossed out by that too. You all wrote excellent essays, boys and girls, Mrs. Ramirez said as she walked to the front of the class. Now let's talk about the Earth Week parade. Nadine Nardo's hand shot up. Are you going to pick the king or queen now, Mrs. Ramirez? She asked. Nancy wiggled excitedly in her seat. She wanted to be the Queen of Green more than anything. Let's talk about the float first, Mrs. Ramirez said. Peter, show the class what you made last night. Peter Patino stood up. He carried something made of colored clay to the front of the classroom. What's that? Asked Tommy Maron. I asked Peter to make a clay model of our parade float, Mrs. Ramirez explained. The kids stretched their neck to see Peter's clay model. Nancy thought it looked a bit like a spaceship. Will our float be made out of clay too? Shelby Miss Metcalf asked. Mrs. Ramirez shook her head.